I always tell my clients all relationships are related. So it was that sitting down and saying, okay, these are habits that I'm having in my romantic relationships. How are these same habits showing up at my job, with my family, with my friends? We talk about attachment styles, and it's funny to me because there's so much attention placed on anxious attachment styles on social media, and I was an avoidant, right? Which means that I was very much the bad guy because, there's so many anxious people on social media who are like these stupid avoidants, these stupid commitment phobic people, right?
Right.
And like, I remember talking about gifts. I remember dating this guy who bought me a very expensive bag. And my response was I took said bag, sold it, and paid my rent, got gas, like paid all my bills.
Oh, wow.
And it happened that like he sent this bag to me, went out of town for work or whatever, got back, found out what happened to the bag, and like completely hit the roof. But it was this whole thing of I had so many issues with receiving.
Yeah.
That just things like that triggered me into doing stupid stuff.
Got you. So for your ancestral trauma. Hey everybody, it's your girl DJ with Plan for Keys podcast, and today I have Keshia Rice. She is a certified dating coach, hypnotherapist, and 2-time Emmy-nominated journalist. Through her coaching program, Cherished Woman, Keshia coaches successful Christian women on how to attract quality men without compromising their values, identity, and femininity. Growing up in a Christian household, Keshia understands what it's like as a woman of faith to balance a conservative upbringing with modern-day hookup culture. Keshia is also the host of the podcast Confidently Cherished, where she chats about everything from how to build confidence and attract your ideal partner to how to heal from past relationships and set boundaries that feel good. Today, Keshia is here to speak on using hypnosis to improve confidence, how to use your dating journey to heal, how ancestral trauma impacts your current relationships, and how improving your love life improves the other areas of your life. How are you today, Keshia?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I am good. Thank you for making time to stop by on the show.
Of course.
Awesome. So before we dive into all of these juicy topics, I want to learn more about you and what got you started in coaching women of faith.
So in one word, trauma. And I say that jokingly, but at the same time, I think the best coaches are great coaches because they have a heart for the people that they work with. And they have a heart for the people that they work with because of the things that they've been through. So, you mentioned I come from a family of preachers. I'm a PK, a preacher's kid. And growing up, I always felt like the church came before everything else.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
Like everything had to be sacrificed because the church needs money for this, so we can't spend on such and such. Wow. Or like all our time has to be spent going to this revival and all of that. As a kid, I went to Christian camp in the summer, right? And, I felt like I wasn't getting enough attention at home. So, of course, I started dating at a young age. And that led me into a whole series of unhappy, not the healthiest of relationships. And it was going through that series of things, kind of realizing there has to be better than this.
Yeah.
In fact, I know there's better than this. My parents currently have been married for almost 40 years.
Wow.
So I was looking at some of the relationships that I was in. I was like, they don't look like this.
Yeah.
I don't feel good in these.
Yeah.
I'm doing all of these things to be liked and to get approval. And at the end of the day, I feel terrible about myself. That has to change. And it was when I started going through my own process of healing and therapy and coaching and everything, I was like, what would it have been like to have had someone there for me.
Yeah.
When I was in like the depths of all of that stuff. And what would life be like if now I could be that person?
Yeah.
For someone who is in that situation.
That's dope. Let me ask you this. I want to piggyback. Like you said, you noticed you were doing things to be liked, but at the end of the day, you didn't feel good. What was the pivotal moment for you that like broke the camel's back? Because I feel like there's always a pivotal moment. Like mine popped up in my head. Do you have one in particular?
Yeah. You know, I'm a millennial. I feel like most of us had a quarter life crisis.
Yeah.
And my quarter life crisis was, it seemed like everyone in my life was doing better than me. And, you know, a lot of us deal with that because, let's be real, social media is everyone's highlight reel.
Yes.
But at the time, I hated the job I had.
Okay.
And I had friends who were getting promotions. You know, I was in a situationship that was not going anywhere. And my Facebook was filled with, we're getting married, we're having babies. I went to a church that was a mega church, and, you know, they had a video ministry. There was a video because, you know, they recorded my friend and I next to each other. We're both in the middle of worship. She looks angelic and I am ugly crying. And I'm like, I can't even God right. So, so, you know, the day came that one of my many friends, you know, was having her bridal shower and all that. And I was helping her plan it. And I just broke down crying in the middle of doing the invitations. And I remember just praying like, you know, I don't even know what I want out of life at this point, but this is not it.
Yeah.
Just not this.
Oh. So so then from there, did you just decide to go to therapy? Like what shift did you make from that day?
Yeah. So at that point, I'd already been to therapy before.
Okay.
So going back to therapy was just like, yeah, okay. Like, let's start there. That just seems like an obvious and natural thing. And it's funny. I'm sure you've heard that saying before, you know, when the student is ready, the master will come.
I think I have.
Yeah. Yeah. And it was just so funny to me because, you know, I worked in TV news at the time as a producer. And one of the things that I would do was like book guests on our shows and all that. And it was just little things like an author would end up coming on our show and their book would be something like, you know, like something self-development. I'd be like, let me check this out. Or, you know, I'd just be randomly scrolling YouTube and like I'd see a certain video that would catch my eye and I'd start watching it. And it just kind of led me down a rabbit hole, a good one, of, you know, learning more about like self-development and finding your purpose. And even at the time, you know, religion wise, like switching churches and different style of like ministry and stuff like that. Just all these things kept happening that resonated with me. And it was just like, okay, let me, you know, feminine energy is all about receiving. So it's kind of like, okay, just let me be open to not necessarily having the structure in place, but just like following where these intuitive hits are going.
Got you.
Right. And eventually I did end up meeting a coach who was like very helpful and helped me find that structure. But I think sometimes we also just have to be willing to be open to receiving, you know, those hints. Like sometimes our brains know before we really know.
I agree. Let me ask you this. If you can break down just a little bit more, like you said, like being like kind of in your feminine, like it's receiving, right? If someone is in a similar situation as you, but they're kind of moving in like their masculine energy, what would they have looked like? What would the opposite look like?
So here's the thing. Masculine energy and feminine energy are both needed. And this is the issue that I have with a lot of femininity coaches, because they're constantly like, oh, you can't get a man because you're too masculine. And yes, like all relationships thrive on polarity. Even if you look at like same-sex relationships, there's always one person who is more in their masculine energy and one person who's more in their feminine energy. So if you want to be the feminine and you're trying to attract someone who is the masculine, then like you can't also be the more masculine. So yes, there's some truths to that. But at the same time, within ourselves, masculine energy is structure, feminine energy is flow.
Got you.
So masculine energy is things like having standards, setting boundaries. So as a woman, you absolutely have to have some masculine energy,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
Feminine energy is creativity. Whenever you feel like you're just in the zone, you're in that moment, being present, you're in that flow state. That is feminine energy. So for me, at the time, I really was just like, hey, I am open to receiving whatever comes my way. If people want to recommend books for me, like, yeah, I'll check them out.
Okay.
If someone sends me a Facebook video or a YouTube video, like, sure, I'll check it out. You know, when I started looking into coaching and therapists and all that, you know, I was just looking at websites and I was like, oh, it seems like this person resonates with me. Not necessarily looking for like, you know, 50 million degrees and all of
Okay.
that. So that was that feminine energy. Whereas if someone is entirely in their masculine, it is that. So if I had been entirely in my masculine at that time,
Yeah.
what that would have looked like was, okay, I need to heal myself in 6 weeks. I need to find the therapist that has the most degrees and that's been
Yeah.
recommended by every single person. I need to do all these different protocols. I've read 10 books. I've taken all these notes. I've highlighted all these things. I'm going to go down the list of every single thing that this book says. Like, that's what it looks like when you are so rigid.
Got you.
Yeah.
Got you. I lost my next question. I'm so sorry. My next question to that, I lost my train of thought. You know what? I'm gonna circle back. That's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna circle back. Okay. So when you found the coach, matter of fact, I do have another question.
Yeah.
When someone's in therapy, do you recommend a therapist and a coach? Or do you recommend a therapist who might also have other modalities under their belt?
So you mentioned it in the intro. I am both a coach and a hypnotherapist. And so I think that traditional talk therapy is very good and is very foundational. So I do think it is a great entry point to someone into self-development work.
Okay.
So I'd kind of recommend that a lot of people see a traditional therapist before they get into other methods because one, hypnotherapy requires you to have a lot of trust in the hypnotherapist.
Okay.
And it requires you to also have a lot of trust in yourself and your ability to make changes. So some people kind of come from not having that, and I find that having seen a traditional therapist is very helpful for that.
Okay.
Coaching is a lot of accountability and a lot of doing. Whereas, you know, traditional talk therapy is a lot of analyzing your past, kind of understanding where things come from.
Yeah.
And coaching is a lot of moving it forward. So hypnotherapy and coaching are great if you're already at the stage of like, I'm a go-getter, let's do this.
Got you.
Right? Whereas I kind of recommend you seeing a therapist first if you're just feeling really confused about how the hell did I get here to begin with? Right?
Got you. Right. Got you. Okay. I was just curious on that because I know, like you said, therapy is just kind of talking your feelings out and all that stuff. Where other modalities, it seems like it really gets to the root to a certain degree. So I've always wondered which one is better. Like when you have the knowledge of like different type of coaches and stuff like that. So
Yeah, I would say this, especially for women, there's a state for a lot of women where they really have to know the why of everything, or they're constantly seeking closure, right? And I feel like if that is where you are, therapy is a great place to start because you're really going to uncover a lot of like, you know, putting things together, being like, okay, I see where this came from. I see where that came from. But there's also a type of really person, but for us, a type of woman who's like, I don't even really care how the hell I got here. I just want to fix it.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And if you're at that space, like starting with hypnotherapy, starting with coaching is great. It's fine.
Got you.
Yeah.
Okay. Before we dive into the topics, I want to ask you, what do you feel about closure? I heard it was a form of manipulation in a way to try to keep the relationship going. Would you agree with that, or what does closure look like to you, and is it really needed?
Closure comes from within. You don't get closure from outside. You don't get closure from other people. So the whole idea of when you're talking about romantic relationships, going to your past partner to get closure, it could work, but the variables in that, the only way you could actually get closure from that other person is if that other person has healed himself. And is so healed and self-aware that they can be like, yeah, these were the things that were going on in my life. This is why I behaved the way I did. This is what I understand about myself. And this is how I've moved on and done all these things. Most people don't have that self-awareness. So the chance that you're going to get that from an ex is not that great. So you have to understand that the best way for you to get closure is to understand, why did I allow myself to be in that situation? What were the circumstances that led me to be attracted to this person? Am I still attracted to that type of person? And if so, why? What is it in me that needs to heal? And so often there's this tendency on social media that if you say things like that, people are like, oh, you're victim blaming. Like you're telling people that they're at fault for like their relationships and all that. And no, at the end of the day, I have ex-boyfriends that I did not have great relationships with. I sincerely hope they are doing well.
Yeah.
But if they are not doing well, it's also not my problem. Right?
Right. Right.
And at the end of the day, I recognize that like what attracted me to them was unhealed parts of myself. And those previous versions of myself, I love them dearly. Yeah. I have grace for them. They didn't know what they didn't know. And there's no need to be mad at that man for whatever season he was in his life. There's no need to be mad at previous versions of myself for those seasons of my life. It is a matter of being grateful. I had those experiences. I learned, and I can move on.
Got you. What advice would you give? Now I'm thinking of another question. What advice would you give to someone who kind of is in like this victim mindset to hold themselves accountable when it comes to being heartbroken? And you know what I'm saying? I know that kind of like what you just mentioned, like both parties kind of play a part, even the ones who do a lot in their relationship. What advice would you give to the party who felt like they were done wrong to hold themselves accountable as to why they went through what they went through?
They probably were done wrong.
They definitely probably were done wrong, but like you kind of like what you said, we all play a part. But what advice would you give them so they can kind of shift their mindset?
To go, first of all, accept that, you probably were done wrong. Yeah, that sucks. There are things in life that suck. But ask yourself, the place that you are in right now, is that place making you happy? Because here's the thing, you could continue to hold on to that hurt. And you can continue to hold on to your unhappiness as well. Or you can make the decision to be better for yourself, to love yourself more. Like at the end of the day, you have to learn to be a little bit more selfish, honestly. You have to learn to be like, look, I love myself a lot and I want me to be happy. So in order for me to be happy, I have to move on. I have to change the way I see things. I may need to get some accountability in the form of a therapist or a coach. I need to work on my healing and all of that so that I can move on and I can be happy. And to some extent, screw that other person. Like, Like maybe they will go on and be miserable for the rest of their lives. Maybe they will grow up and heal, whatever. But I need to be happy. So that requires me to do the things that I need to do to take care of me.
Got you. Okay. I want to dig into the first topic. The one that definitely caught my eye was how ancestral trauma impacts your current relationships. I would love to hear you talk about this topic and just go into detail on what you mean by it.
Yeah. So I don't know if you ever heard the word epigenetics.
I have heard the word epigenetics. I have heard it. I've read it in a book, but I'm trying to, me going into detail right now, I'm going to let you go into detail on what it is.
So epigenetics is a whole field of study.
Okay.
And if you Google it, you will go down a huge rabbit hole. But for the sake of our conversation, one of the things that you need to know is that it's believed that trauma is passed down in the womb for 8 generations.
Oh, wow.
So when you think about that, from the moment that you were born, you are carrying stuff from generations previous to you. And, you and I are both Black women. So when we think about that, 8 generations was very deeply into slavery.
Right.
When you think about all the trauma that we were born carrying. So we get into these relationships as teenagers, as adults, and there's a part of us that is still carrying stuff, good and bad, from 200 years ago, right?
Right.
So we have to think about, one, we are literally born oppressed. So when we think about getting into relationships and like being triggered by other people's, stuff, by things that people say, we're going to easily feel triggered if we feel like someone's controlling us, and that may not even be their intent.
Yeah.
But if we feel that, then that shows up in how we react to people. Mm-hmm. That shows up in like how we might pull back, be slow to commit.
Yeah.
So we have that going for us to begin with. But then even think about your immediate generations before. My mom is a workaholic, and I get that from her. I have, to quote Kevin Gates, I have 6 jobs, but, and I used to think that only had to do with career, right?
Yeah.
And then I realized, no, I work for everything, including in relationships. I constantly felt like I had to do in order to be loved. And this was why I was not getting a lot of great relationships, and I was not getting that love, because either A, I was in relationships where I was mothering men and doing things for them because I constantly felt like I had to do things, right?
Yeah.
Or I would get in relationships with men who sincerely wanted to take care of me, who really loved me, who really cared for me, and they would get frustrated because I wasn't accepting that.
Where were you at? Like, where were you at? Like when you were in those relationships with the men who were loving and wanted to take care of you, like how were you reacting to them?
Just things like, so, you talk about ancestral stuff and like understanding how it translates. I will never say that growing up I was spoiled. I was well loved, right?
Okay.
But, my parents worked a lot to get us things. And as a consequence of that, oftentimes my dad would come home and, I'd be like, I want to play or whatever.
Yeah.
And he'd be like, I'm tired. He just wanted to like lie down or whatever. And he would see that I would get sad by that. And he would like buy me something later on. So then I got in relationships, and I got in relationships with men who were generous, and it was like, I would get gifts and my attitude would be like, screw you. You can't buy my affection. Right.
Got you. Okay.
And I had to realize that, like, first of all, My dad did that because he grew up in poverty. He grew up with so much lack
Got you.
that he wanted his family to have better. This was his way of showing love, you know?
Yeah.
It was not his way of like pushing me off to the side, right?
Yeah.
He was genuinely. So talking about like ancestral trauma, my dad is an ancestor. Like that's a direct. And understanding that because that was his behavior and it was coming from a place of love, before I realized that, I was translating that as just him trying to get me out of his hair.
Got you.
And then I started dating, and when men gave me stuff, I translated that as, this is so that you stay to the side and you're not like bothering me, right?
Yeah. Wow. So how did you move out of that way of thinking? Like, or how do you move out of that way of thinking?
I mean, it is, first of all, it is having like conversations.
Yeah.
So talking to my parents about like how they grew up and things like that, like you do start to understand like, okay, like they're really trying to like, again, they grew up with not a lot. They're like, when we become adults, we want better for our kids. So we're going to do all these things. So it was hearing that, but it was also like learning that empathy, learning how to put yourself in someone else's shoes. And then understanding, I always tell my clients, all relationships are related. So it was that sitting down and saying, okay, these are habits that I'm having in my romantic relationships. How are these same habits showing up at my job, with my family, with my friends? We talk about attachment styles, and it's funny to me because there's so much attention placed on anxious attachment styles on social media, and I was an avoidant, right? Which means that I was very much the bad guy because, there's so many anxious people on social media who are like these stupid avoidants, these stupid commitment phobic people, right?
Right.
And like, I remember talking about gifts. I remember dating this guy who bought me a very expensive bag. And my response was, I took said bag, sold it, and paid my rent, got gas, like paid all my bills.
Oh, wow.
And it happened that like he sent this bag to me, went out of town for work or whatever, got back, found out what happened to the bag, and like completely hit the roof. But it was this whole thing of, I had so many issues with receiving.
Yeah.
That just things like that triggered me into doing stupid stuff.
Got you. So for your ancestral trauma regarding that, like men buying you stuff and you feeling like they're pushing you to the side, for you, did you come to the agreement for yourself that you just don't like people to buy you things, or did you work through that?
So it was twofold. It was one, again, not understanding the whole thing with my dad.
Got you.
And then two, coming from, the women in my family, again, are very hard workers.
Yeah.
And that was always ingrained in me too. You work, right? Work hard.
Right.
And the downside of having that ingrained to you is that you feel like you have to work for everything. So there's nothing wrong with teaching your kids the value of hard work. Yeah. But when you make that the number one focus, you can sometimes subconsciously send the message that you're not worthy of receiving things just because of who you are, that you're not allowed to just be. Yeah. So that was another thing too, is that again, I had dated men who were generous and stuff like that. If I didn't feel worthy of receiving gifts, then I was going to constantly push gifts aside. So to your point about healing that, it was understanding where both these wounds were coming from. The father wound of like feeling that my dad was just not paying attention, that he was just trying to, give me stuff to placate me. And the mother side feeling like, I shouldn't have been receiving even that stuff to placate me because I didn't work for it. Right.
Wow. Yeah.
So like understanding where those were coming from and then being like, both of these are ridiculous. I know my dad loves me, right?
Yeah.
And also, even on my mom's side, like, as hard as my mom worked, as hard as my grandmother worked, like, I saw them still enjoying themselves.
Right.
I saw, I saw my dad give stuff to my mom. I saw my grandmother was actually divorced by the time I was born, but she had boyfriends while I was growing up, and I saw how kind they were to her and everything. And my great grandfather spoiled her, so like that was like a whole other thing. But like, it was a lot of times it just comes from this whole questioning your beliefs. Like, is that really true? Like, when I look, am I really seeing examples of this? And in my case, I was fortunate that in my own family I could see the contradictions. But even I often tell my clients, if you're not seeing that in your family, if your ancestral stuff is so unhealthy that everyone in your family is unhealthy, which happens,
Yeah.
right?
It does.
Then you have to start creating environments where you see what healthy relationships look like. This means following healthy couples on social media,
Yeah.
watching TV shows that have that representation. Because what you focus on magnifies, right?
Right.
Like, I just did a video about this on one of my social medias.
I like that video. Yes, I saw that video.
Yeah, where I was saying, like, I drive a Toyota Corolla. When I made the decision to get a Corolla, I saw them all over the road, right? And it's not because suddenly everybody went out and bought Corollas. It's just that's where my mind was. So what do you think happens if you're on TikTok and Instagram constantly following accounts that are talking about men are trash?
You're going to focus on the men that are trash.
Right. And that's all you're going to see, too. You're going to constantly see examples of men being trash.
Right.
Right.
Right. Right. Absolutely. Before we dig into the next topic, I wanted to piggyback on what you were talking about, like actually sitting down and realizing, the father wound and then your mother wound, and then really looking and examining. So I know a lot of our beliefs stem from like our upbringing and stuff like that, and it's dug deep in the subconscious mind. Could you break down how? One may stay stuck in a situation without peeling back the layers? Do you get what I'm asking?
Yeah. Okay. So that's why I became a hypnotherapist to start with, because that's what hypnosis does. Okay. Hypnosis is all about getting down into that deep layer.
Yeah.
But so our subconscious mind is set in our early childhood years by the age of 7.
Yep.
So we become adults, and we are really essentially 7-year-olds in 20, 30, 40, 50-year-old bodies, right? Mm-hmm. So, oftentimes talking about what I said earlier about like sitting down, does this make sense? Like, oftentimes we get into these relationships and things happen. And when I say relationships, at this point, I'm not talking about just romantic, friendships, all of that.
All of that, yeah.
So things happen, and sometimes you look at yourself and you're like, okay, that was kind of childish how I reacted to that. And it's like, no, like it really is, because that's your subconscious reacting like that.
Right.
So we have to understand that, a lot of this stuff is set in our early childhood, and also our brains equate safety with familiarity.
Right.
So, this is oftentimes why people stay in abusive relationships.
Yeah.
Because, yes, they cognitively know that this relationship is not healthy. But subconsciously, that is what they know. That is what they are familiar with. It has been normalized. Oftentimes, people who are in abusive relationships as adults dealt with some type of abuse in childhood.
Yeah.
Right? So their brain has decided this is normal.
Yeah.
Right?
Right.
So first of all, it starts with that awareness, understanding that like, hey, because of how I was born, because of how I was raised, I was primed for certain things. whatever those things are. Like, you know, people who grow up in Western societies are primed to be very individualistic. People who grow up in, you know, Asian, African, Caribbean, those societies are raised to be very about the collective.
Okay.
And, you know, there's good and bad to both of those.
Yeah.
So first of all, it's not judging it. It's just understanding, okay, I was born under this set of circumstances. These are kind of the things that I'm primed for. Now, knowing these are the kind of things that I'm primed for, how do these patterns keep showing up? Right?
Right. Right.
And then knowing, okay, these are the patterns that keep showing up. Are these patterns serving me? And I encourage you to ask it that way. Not, is this good or bad? Is this serving me? Does this align with the type of life that I want to live? Because there's no reason to judge other people. And there's even, we have a tendency to judge ourselves as well. So, you know, I was bad because I did this, because I kept following this pattern.
Yeah.
Yeah. And no, like, that season of you, that version of you did what you needed to do to survive. Like,
that's literally what your brain is thinking for real.
Right. So, you know, express gratitude for her. Like, thank you. You got us here.
Yeah.
And I appreciate you so much for getting us here. But now, this is where I would like my life to go. And these patterns don't serve that.
Got you. Okay. Thank you for sharing that. So, how to use your dating journey to heal? I think we touched on this like throughout the episode. But when you put this on the form, what were your thoughts on that?
So, back to all relationships are related. You know, one of the things that dating teaches you is you're getting out here, you're meeting different people, and if you really are serious about meeting new people, then you're meeting people who are different from you as well.
Right.
So that in itself is an opportunity, because you get to talk to them, you get to see how they think, you get to see their worldview, and sometimes you can adopt some of that, like, what he said about such and such, like, that really, that's something I want to consider. Like, that's something I would like my life to go like. But also, we talk about all these whole, like, men are trash things on social media and everything, but there's a part of, yes, manipulative people exist, but there's also people will do what you allow them to do.
Yeah, there is that too. Yeah.
Yeah. So, you know, one of the things is when you see yourself improving in your romantic relationships, learning how to translate that. Like, I found that in my journey when I really started getting serious about dating and having a healthier relationship and being taken advantage of by men and being like, oh, I need to set some boundaries here.
Yeah.
Right? And when I started setting those boundaries, I was like, I wonder if I can take those same boundaries to my parents, right? Let me take those same boundaries to my siblings, right?
Got you.
So, you know, I was going on dates and being like, this isn't acceptable to me, right? Like, I can't do this. Or, you know, like, hey, you said something that I'm not comfortable with. I wish you well. You know, we're just not aligned. And I was getting better at doing that on dates. So, you know, you become an adult, you don't always agree with your parents on everything, right?
Right.
So, you know, I would have conversations with my dad and he would say something, I'd be like, I love you so much, but I don't agree with that, right?
How did you get to that point? Especially, how did you get to that point? Like, especially in the dating realm, like, people, they have a hard time setting boundaries. Do you think it's fear of rejection and thinking that the person would walk away? Why do you think it's so hard for people to set boundaries? And then for you, like, what did it for you to be able to just set boundaries?
It is fear of rejection. And for me, back to that quarter life crisis, just, I got to a point where I hated myself that much. And I did not want to be there. I wanted to love myself. And it came from a point of like wanting to love myself more. Right?
Yeah.
So that is where that whole setting boundaries things comes at. Like, I'm married and I love my husband so much. I really do. He's great, right? And when he came into my life, like there were things about him and his personality that, like, when I asked God for like what I wanted in a man, there were things in him that I didn't even know I should pray for that I'm glad I got. So
Awesome.
yeah, at the same time, I love myself more than I love my husband. Right?
Yeah.
So, I hope and pray that our relationship remains good.
Got you.
Right? I hope that he remains a good man. But if he doesn't, I'm not afraid to walk because I love myself more.
That's what's up.
And we have to have that same thing. For me, when I was at that point where I didn't love myself as much, one of the things I thought about was future me. I was like, okay, I had my quarter life crisis at like 24, right?
Yours was early.
Well, quarter life, so that's about right.
Yeah.
So I started thinking, I was like, okay, 24-year-old me is not happy and I don't really like her right now.
Okay.
But 30-year-old me, maybe I can love her.
Yeah.
And if 30-year-old me is happy, what is in place right now? If 30-year-old me is happy, then 30-year-old me like has boundaries. 30-year-old me is in a healthy relationship. 30-year-old me has gotten better at managing her finances because 24-year-old me was kind of a wreck. You know what I mean?
So how did you subconsciously, because so like they talk about subconsciously, the brain, so our subconscious has what, like 95%?
Yeah.
And then the conscious only has that 5%. So you're thinking of all these things like, okay, this is where I want to be. It's definitely at 30. I want to love myself there. What tips could you give, or what did you do like to kind of get yourself there? Because so many people have issues fighting their subconscious to get into a routine, to even be able to set boundaries or get out of their own way as far as, oh, well, I want people to like me, or whatever the case may be. Like,
yeah. So, one casual plug here for hypnotherapy. Quickest way to do it. Really is. But the more conventional route, and the route that I started with before I discovered hypnotherapy, is our brain creates neural pathways.
Yeah.
So, and it's just like you would think of like a nature trail pathway. Like if you were walking in a park or a forest or whatever, you can tell the areas where nobody walks, right?
Yeah.
And you can tell the areas where a lot of people have walked through because of the foot traffic and everything. You can see it. So the more we do something, the more that pathway is created. Just like if you were learning a new language.
Yeah.
Right? The more you learn it, the more you practice, the more you retain. And if you learn a new language and you go for years, like a lot of people, they learn a language in school and then they completely forget it.
Yeah.
It's because the grass grows back on that pathway because they don't practice. So when I started thinking about like future me, those were the pathways I started creating. So like at the time, people probably would have thought I was a crazy person. Because like I would have like post-it notes or like phone reminders or just stuff everywhere that was like, would future you like this? Does this serve her?
Oh,
Like,
wow.
And just in doing that, it was like seeing those reminders and stuff. It was like, oh, let me put this chocolate cake down, right?
Yeah.
Let me put my credit card up, right?
Got you. So neurons that fire together, wire together.
Right. And it's the thing that a lot of people don't understand is that self-development is not something that you do in 2 weeks. Like, don't get me wrong.
That's what it is. Like when I be asking for tips, because I know people they'll try and then they'll fall off and then they fall off. Like they don't get back on the saddle. They, like you just said, I think most people don't understand self-development is really a lifelong thing.
And I don't have a problem with like quick courses and stuff like that, because if you go on my website, I have courses, right? But you also have to get in the mind frame that that course, that program, whatever, is a jump start. And then after it ends, the whole idea is for that to kind of jumpstart you so that you keep going. And talking about masculine energy, you start putting in containers to keep going. So your container might be having, again, a therapist or a coach to hold you accountable. Okay. Your container might be an accountability buddy. Your container might be, like I said, I had notes like around so that I was visually reminded. Like, I don't mean that. Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, no, I mean, like, at the time, even at the time, I thought that was crazy. But I also knew me. Yeah. I needed something crazy because I was that type of person who would, like, be all gung-ho, hop on the bandwagon, and then, like, completely fall off and, like, fall further. So I needed something that was like,
got you.
You're going to get reminded about this, right?
Got you. Got you. Okay. How improving your love life improves other areas of your life? I feel like we've touched on this as well, but when you put it on the form, what thoughts came to your mind?
So, I have a fair number of clients who, they come to me for dating and relationships. And it's funny because when I was on my coaching journey, I started as a career coach.
Okay.
And switched to dating and relationships. But now I have clients who are like, since we've been working together, I've gotten promoted. I've gotten raises. And it's the same thing because the skills that they're learning better communication skills. Mm-hmm. They're learning how to set boundaries and they're learning to love themselves more. So when you love yourself the most, you're not afraid to go to your boss and be like, I'm underpaid. Right. Right. And to quote Beyonce, you won't break my soul at this job. Like,
I feel that. Right. Okay, so when you work with your clients, they come in for dating relationships and then other areas of their life improve. What things do you work on with your clients in particular? Like when they come in, like you put on the form, you work with high achieving Christian women. What like scenarios or issues, I don't even know if I want to call them problems, but things that they have that they would like to work on, and how would you say it translates?
Yeah, so I said a Christian, but honestly, so, I'm a Black woman, which means that I study 50 million different things. Because, we love our degrees, don't we? One of the things I studied was religion. And so I work with women of faith, which means that the majority of my clients are Christian. But I also work with Muslim women, Hindu women, Jewish women, all of that. Gotcha. Even women who are more spiritual, your crystals, law of attraction type than. And I say that because one of the things that all of us tend to have in common, and I would say this even in like the woo-woo law of attraction community, they swear they don't have this problem, but patriarchy is real in all systems of belief. So, even for me, I had to deconstruct. I had to, the churches that I grew up going to, there's a lot of things I don't agree with now as far as like how they treat women and things like that. And so one of the things that I help women do is understand like where are these patterns coming from. So understanding the ancestral stuff, like what were the patterns in your family line, the women in your family now, your aunties, your female cousins, your mom, what are the unhealthy patterns that you see, and also the environments that you grew up in. Like talking about Christianity, churches tend to take advantage of single women as free labor. Because, of course, they have nothing else going on in their life. Of course, they can volunteer all the time. Right? Because they ain't got a man and they don't have kids. So, Yeah. And I say that not to slam churches, but at the same time, if that is how you were always treated or you've been treated for the past few years since you were an adult, that, like, you're supposed to give labor to something higher than you. A lot of women don't recognize how that translates into they do get married. And it's like you're supposed to serve something higher than you, i.e. your husband.
Yeah.
Right.
Oh, wow.
And people don't people don't realize those connections, right?
Yeah.
So that is one of the things that like we start with foundationally is we have to identify these patterns, and we have to identify in what ways have you been conditioned to do things that don't serve your best interest, right?
Yeah.
So then after that, it is about, okay, now that you understand these things, coaching can only do so much. We have to get you out in the real world so you can practice it. So then it's talking about communication skills, talking about asking good questions on a date, using your discernment, learning how to set boundaries, because you're going to come across somebody who tries your boundaries.
Yes.
And it may not even be that this person is manipulative or anything like that. It could be completely innocent. But thinking about Cardi B, I don't cook, I don't clean, but let me tell you, like,
I love that line, by the way, because anyway.
yes. But, you know, I have seen this be a common scenario where like a man asks a woman when they first start dating, oh, do you cook? And it really doesn't matter what the woman's answer is. Yes, I cook all the time. Or no, I don't cook. That doesn't mean that she cooks for him, right?
Right.
But I have seen women like feel guilted into that. And it's like, no, you can say, I don't do it for you. Or I wouldn't do it for you unless we were in a serious relationship. Like you can say things like that. You have that right.
Yeah.
But there are women who are afraid to say no to anything because they think it's innocent. And I'm not even necessarily blaming the man in that situation because he may have been raised that way.
Right.
Like he may have a father who told him, oh, the second you meet a woman, you need to find this out. Right?
Right. Right. Wow. Wow. Okay. So with you helping them in that way, seeing those connections and all of that stuff, like you said, you're able to build on learning about communication and things like that, then that's when they kind of blossom and it just spills over all over their lives.
Yeah. So really once they get into that realm of like starting to go out more and set those boundaries and have those communication skills and everything, that's when I talk to them about like, hey, you know, this translates to other areas of your life too, right?
Yeah.
You know, that like you can make your needs and your wants known on the job and with your family and with your friends. And also having that conversation of, because the pushback I always get from that is, well, what if so gets mad at me?
Yeah.
And it's like, the people who are upset with you because you have boundaries are people who took advantage of the fact that you don't have boundaries.
That's a fact.
Right. Now, don't get me wrong, because if people get used to a certain thing, it might take them a second to adjust. But when people actually love you and care about you, even if there are hiccups, they'll adjust. But if somebody in your life is refusing to adjust, that's somebody who doesn't have your best interest at heart anyways.
That's definitely a lesson I had to learn for myself. Like, I think that fear of people walking away, once I've learned to set my boundaries and once I started setting them, and then trying to figure out the difference, like if somebody is either they're just having a hiccup to me setting boundaries or if they just were refusing to. Yeah, that was a big lesson I had to learn.
Well, and you know, there's that balance because I have definitely seen women want to go guns blazing. You know what I mean? Like they set boundaries and like somebody's like, oh, and they're like, oh, well, obviously you don't love me. Like, screw you. Like,
yeah, you know.
And yeah, I think an example of that, my husband and I did not live together until we got married. Mm-hmm. And I am very good at like compartmentalizing, and I like that. Yeah. So when I work, I like to finish working. I kind of like to have a mind clean, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And then go up to whatever the next part of my day is. And, you know, I remember we got married and I was working an overnight shift. So like I would stop working and my husband would like get up and get ready for the day. Right. Mm-hmm. And he'd immediately be like, hey, good morning. How was work? Like, how's everything going? And I had to be like, I can't. I need like 10 minutes. like just, I cannot right now. Like just give me a second. And, you know, talking about hiccups, there were a couple of times where like he would forget. And I've seen women when situations like that come, oh, obviously you don't care about me. And it's like, no, he had a hiccup, but I saw him improving and getting better. And that's the difference. You have to set your boundaries. You also have to give people grace, like a little period of time to adjust. And note that I said a little period of time, not 10 years. You know?
That's another issue. Well, I won't dig into that. How do you use hypnosis to improve confidence?
So, first of all, hypnosis. Through hypnosis, oftentimes you can help someone uncover memories that have been repressed, which is a common thing. Like the most simplest example I can think of that is that there are women out here who have more than one child because our brains block the level of pain. Like women remember childbirth as being a painful experience, but if they remember the full extent of the pain, there's no way in hell a woman would have more than one child. So Mother Nature solves that. It blocks a lot of that pain so that a woman is able to have. But to that point, we do repress memories. So, there are times where people have, say, fear of public speaking, and they don't remember exactly where that fear came from. So hypnosis can be used in things like that to help them go back to the first memory. And when they remember that their first memory is they were in second grade and they were answering a question and stuttered, and Timmy made a joke about it and the class laughed. And they realize now that they're 30 that Timmy is a loser and no one cares what Timmy thinks anyways. Like that cures the you know what I mean?
What if you run into somebody who gets re-traumatized all over again? Then how do you work with like a client like that?
Well, even then, it's a chance for them to actually work through it this time and not have their brain just shut it down so that it comes up again in 10 years and they don't remember why, right?
Right.
So, sometimes just knowing where it came from is good enough. Sometimes it's an opportunity to actually work through it. But also, hypnosis uses the power of suggestion, this is where I went back to at the very beginning when I said, you have to trust yourself and you have to trust your hypnotherapist. Because if those two things are in place, then, as a hypnotherapist, when I'm talking to a person's subconscious, I can give suggestions to help them be more confident and all that. And those become like, like you get a song stuck in your head.
Yeah.
Those become like repeating songs in their subconscious, like those suggestions. So if the trust is there, then like they believe those things and they will feel more confident.
Wow. Okay. Do you have a situation or a scenario where you dealt with someone who might have lacked confidence, either dating or relationships or just anywhere, and then after a session, they got better? Like, do you have any situation like that? Or
no. Define better, because so here's why I say that.
I feel like hypnotherapy, there's more. You got to do more than one session, right? So I think that's why I said better. Or no, it could just.
It really depends, because I have been doing hypnosis for only a year now. So, there are people who are more experienced than me who have different stories. But my experience is I've had people come to me for a certain thing, and one session was all it took.
Wow.
I have had people come to me for a certain thing and it took 10 or 12 sessions.
Got you.
You know what I mean? So I have definitely seen people after one session, they feel better. Right? But then it's not all the way there.
Got you.
Maybe they're 10% better. Maybe they're 20% better. So does hypnosis cure things? Which I think is the question that a lot of people have.
Yeah.
Absolutely, it does.
Okay.
But some people need one hypnosis session. Some people need hypnosis, and they will also, like, I have some clients, if I see that something's kind of stubborn, they'll have their live hypnosis with me, and I might also record something for them to listen to before they go to bed. And that will help, seal it in.
Gotcha.
That they're listening to before they go to sleep. So it's really just a matter of degree. Some people need more of something than others, or even different situations. Like, I see a hypnotherapist myself.
Okay.
there was a certain food that I was trying to stop eating. And after one hypnosis session, it worked too well. I see it. I want to throw up. Like I can.
Oh, wow.
I cannot.
I need to see a hypnotherapist, real talk. Oh,
But, there have been other things that I've gone to hypnosis before and it's taken, 5 or 6 sessions.
Got
So
you.
it's kind of like understanding that you need to trust the process and being open to talking about feminine energy and receiving, being open to whatever that looks like. If I've gone to something and one session was good, I don't question it. I'm like, oh, I feel good. I'm not going to keep trying to go, right?
do you think that's a problem with people who might try it and then they question it and then they have to come back for the same thing? Do you think they might be questioning something?
Yeah, because I do talking again, that goes back to trust. I don't take that personally if that happens because I know some people can't trust me because they can't trust, period. Right.
Yeah. Yeah. Which is a lot of people, even though they say they're not like that, but.
Right. So it does come with having that openness and that willingness to be like, hey, I'm willing to see how this goes. And yeah, if you do a hypnosis session, you feel great after, like not questioning that. And then also being honest though, if like, you're like, okay, like that felt good in the moment, that felt good the next day, but the day after that, I was just like, I felt myself feeling the way I was before. Like, okay, well, like, let's do another session. Like,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Dope. Let me ask you this. What projects do you have going on right now?
So right now I'm really focusing on my one-on-one coaching.
Okay.
And the reason why is because talking about like social media and everything, in the coaching space, everyone's trying to do group coaching programs.
Yeah.
And I don't have a problem with group coaching programs. I'm currently a member of a group coaching program, right?
Okay.
But at the same time, it's just the way my personality is set up. I really love that one-on-one connection.
Yeah.
And I feel like groups just take away from that. So that's my main thing right now is focusing on my one-on-one coaching and also understanding that, one-on-one coaching comes at a higher price point.
Yeah.
It means that it's not accessible to everyone. I get that. So also I am starting to work more on building up my YouTube channel so that that resource is there too.
Got you. Okay. That is dope. What tip would you leave for the audience, for people who are dating right now and trying to figure it out and want to find a partner? What tip or advice would you give that you'd like to leave with the audience?
Get out of your head. So it's too many people overthink the whole dating process. They, every date is marriage or bust, right?
Yeah.
So, get out of your head in so many ways. So enjoy the date, enjoy getting to know people, see where that leads you. Also, in general, get out of your head and into your body, just move more. Like you'll notice that like your feminine energy, your being presence gets so much better. If, for me, I've started doing Pilates, if it's walking, dance, whatever, like just do that. And get out of your head. Also like journaling. So whether that is you write it down or, the iPhone voice notes app.
Yeah.
Doing an audio journal. Like I have found so many times that I've been worried about something and again, our brains love patterns. So once we start doing something, it just keeps snowballing.
Yeah.
And I will just take out my phone and start recording the voice note like, hey, this is what I'm thinking. This is how I'm feeling in the moment. This is going on. 2 or 3 days later, I'll go back and listen to it and I'm like, that was so stupid. Like, or like that was a thing, but like after I did that and got it out, I thought of a solution to it, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, dope. Okay. Well, I want to thank you for coming on the show. Tell the audience where they can find you.
Yeah, so if you can spell my first name correctly, so it's Keshia, Keshia, and then my last name is Rice, Rice, then it's easy to find me because my website is KeshiaRice.com. I'm at Keshia Rice on TikTok, on YouTube, and on Instagram.
Okay. And on the show. And until next time.